he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another. By this, everyone will know you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." The Gospel of the Lord. I give you a new commandment. So I'm going to be honest with you. Until spending time each week with our confirmation students and really sitting down to study the Ten Commandments, I'm not sure I knew them very well. I mean, probably like most of you, I kind of knew them generally, right? I knew stealing, murder, lying, coveting, keeping the Sabbath, no other gods. We're all in there. But I didn't really know them in a way that they were a normal part of my life. So let's try this together. Brandon will help. First commandment. Anybody?
No other gods.
No other gods. Good. Second. Oh boy. Second? You got it? Don't take the Lord's name in vain. Third commandment. Sabbath. Yes. 4? Yeah, how come all the parents know that? 5th. Yeah. Yep. Do not kill or murder. 6. Adultery. Kim's on fire. 7. Do not steal. 8. Bear false witness. Yep. And then we put 9 and 10 together. Yeah, don't covet. So coveting is, what we talked about in confirmation. Coveting is when you want something somebody else has so bad that you start to scheme and plan how to take it from them. That's what coveting is. So the commandments are about two things: our relationship with God and our relationship with each other. The Ten Commandments are important because they establish for us what a healthy community looks like, what it looks like to live, to work, and to worship together. When we choose to act against these commandments, relationships fall apart, and the very fabric of society starts to unravel. When Jesus was asked which of the commandments were most important, Jesus responded, like our song this morning, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself." Jesus went further to say, "On this rests all the law and the prophets. Love God and love each other." It's as simple and incredibly difficult as that. So it might have been strange for the 11 disciples still with Jesus, at this point Judas had left to betray him, that he calls this a new commandment. What's so new about loving each other? Love is a strange thing. It's some deep down feeling that wells up in us when we're around certain people. It's an emotion that can allow us to look past how our spouse does that thing that annoys us, or how our children frustrate us, or how our parents drive us crazy. Love is a deep connection we have for someone, a powerful emotion that shapes how we view other people. Poets, theologians, scientists, and scholars have spent hours and hours and pages trying to describe love, and yet it still rests beyond the power of words to fully describe. Some people are really easy to love. They're kind, friendly, happy people who seem to easily show love back to us in return. These relationships are great. Of course, there's good times and bad times, up and downs, like any relationship. But in these relationships, love seems to come so naturally and just makes so much sense to us. These are people that in the middle of our work or our school day, we wish we could just drop everything to spend time with them. And there are people who are not so easy to love. People who have traits or characteristics we just don't find very appealing. People who say or do things that are just so different than us. People who don't look like us or share the same values as us. People who hold maybe different political views. So strongly sometimes that we find it hard to get along. That feeling that we get in the depths of our souls, that feeling of love, just doesn't well up in the same way. So I wonder if we're missing something. I wonder if Jesus meant something more than an emotional response when he tells us to love one another. For me, this new commandment rests on Jesus' words, just as I have loved you. The Greek word hos, which is translated just as, can be translated also as in the same way. In the same way that I have loved you, love one another. Jesus isn't talking about feelings and emotions. Those things are hard to control. And often our first impressions of people aren't fair to who they are, but that emotional gut response can be hard to let go of. And I don't know about you, but changing how I feel emotionally about someone is hard to do and takes lots of time. It spends hours and hours and even years with a person before you truly start to understand who they are and how you feel about them begins to change. Instead, Jesus is talking about our actions. The ministry of Jesus was about actions toward other people, healing the sick, giving sight to the blind, changing water into wine, eating with outcasts, spending time among those on the fringes of society, challenging the status quo that kept some rich and powerful at the expense of others, feeding the hungry, serving one another, and just before this text, washing each other's feet. The beauty of this is that you don't really have to like the other person. You don't have to have that emotional bond to live toward them the way Christ calls us to. And over time, something happens. When we live in service toward other people, all those biases, those first impressions we hold towards others, start to melt away. When we engage our bodies in service toward other people, we come to know them for who they really are. When we work for justice, for those that society pushes and keeps at the margins, not only is our world transformed, but we're transformed with it. It isn't about who we like and who we don't like. It truly becomes all of us working together in love and service for the sake of others. No longer us and them, but instead we. So I've been reflecting a lot about these past 6 or 7 months since you called me as your pastor. Together we've tried new things. How we worship and the things we do in worship are a conversation we're continuing to have as we change some things and try other things. You know what really scares a pastor? That in the process of changing some things or trying other things or challenging us to think differently about who we are as a congregation, that I would cause you to feel out of place in this church, or that your sense of faith and life in the congregation would be undermined. It terrifies a pastor to think that something they do might cause you to stop coming to church, to stop being a part of the life of a congregation, to direct your time and energy to something else. We won't all agree on a lot of different things. We won't all like the changes that we try or new things. Some of those things might make us angry. Some of those things might make us sad and long for the way we used to do things. Some of these things may challenge long-held beliefs and practices and make us feel uncomfortable. So let me suggest perhaps 2 things. First, be kind and be honest. If there are things about our life together that you don't like or that make you uncomfortable, tell me, and tell me why. So let's commit to one another, not to gossip among ourselves, but to honestly share with each other what we're experiencing in open communication. And second, no matter what else is happening around us in the world or in our church, no matter how those things make us feel, let's commit to living out Christ's command to love one another in the same way that he loved us. Even when we disagree, let's live in service toward each other. Even when we're upset with one another, let's work together for community. Even when we don't like each other very much, let's live as Christ called us, building a community of faith that witnesses to the good news of God and Jesus Christ through our actions in the world. In this way, while we continue to grow and change, as some things we do look a little different and other things stay the same, whether we like those changes or maybe aren't so thrilled, we remain one congregation, one body, living in love for God, one another, and our world. I give you a new commandment. Amen.